Well, this is what we love to do. Look back, reminisce, think about the incredible legends of Baylor athletics. And on occasion, we'll bring you, of course, Grant Taft was our debut. And today, we're joined by two great Baylor legends, College Football Hall of Famers, Don Trull and Lawrence Elkins in studio at Sikkim 365. Man, it's great to have you, both of you. I want to start with Coach Bridgers. How far ahead of his time was he compared to where college football was at that time, and really what it took to finally a lot of people understand you can throw the football like that?
You want me to answer first, Lawrence? I'll answer that.
Go ahead.
Yeah, that was one reason I came to Baylor. I grew up in Oklahoma City, Southeast High School, and our high school coach was kind of ahead of his time. We ran the spread, which became shotgun formation and all, besides split T and all. And I threw in high school 234 passes, which is a lot for 10 games in high school back in 1958. And I was looking at a couple other schools, and then I heard John Bridgers from Baltimore. Johnny Unitas was always my idol, and said they were going to throw the ball, put in the pro offense at Baylor. So I came, and we put the pro offense in. Probably in Lawrence can dwell on this more with Raymond Berry, since he was on the Colts where John Bridgers was the offensive line coach when they won the world championship back in, I guess it's 58. And he came to our every spring training while I was in school, as well as Lawrence. I think he came the same way. And I probably learned more about the passing game from Raymond than any coach or anybody. And we were very wide open, and I think probably more than anything, we used an audible system, which that I was very comfortable with it. And I would say I probably audibled. Lawrence can say what he thinks, but I think 60% of the time, maybe more, we audible. We'd come to the line of scrimmage, and we saw what they were giving us, and we had a play that we could run that would take advantage of what alignments there were in. And you said you started out with a question about how much ahead of his time. I think 50 years at least.
You were at Brownwood High School under the great Gordon Wood. Darrell Royal wanted you to come to Texas, and yet he thought, Gordon Wood, that Baylor would be a better fit for you as well because of exactly what he was talking about?
Yes, he absolutely did. Darrell Royal just showed up at my house the weekend before with half his coaching staff, and I was leaning toward Texas. And Gordon on that Monday called me in his office, and he said, "Son, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but here's the circumstances. You're not going to get much bigger, and you're not going to play defensive end. And if you're lucky, you'll catch 10 passes your whole career at Texas." He says, "There's a coach at Baylor that has a wide open offense that I think you're suited to. And don't you tell Royal I said this, because we're good friends, but you think about going to Baylor." And I changed my mind and went to Baylor.
Well, and of course the rest is history, both in the College Football Hall of Fame and many other things. And we're going to get to certain moments, games, the good, the bad, and sometimes the disappointing. But you told me, Lawrence, about what Coach Trull, or Don Trull would do, basically was almost a coach in the field, that in the huddle, he would change the plays, not just the audible at the line of scrimmage, but you told me that he knew the offense as well as anybody.
I mean, they'd send in somebody with a play, and he kind of looked at him, looked at the huddle, and he said, "Well, here's what we're going to call." I don't know if Coach Bridgers knew that, he might get a little livid, but Don was that smart, though, and he might have been the only quarterback in the country at the time in college that was able to do his own thing, about play calling.
Don, what do you think then when you see quarterbacks today with these wristbands, at every level? They look, there's a big thing, they flip it. I understand maybe the offenses, I don't know if they're more complex now than ever before, but what are your thoughts about that?
Well, it's the changing times. There's a lot of things that have changed from when Lawrence and I both played, which some of them I agree with and some of them I don't agree with. But once they put it in, everybody uses it. I think it's unfortunate a lot of college kids coming out that don't call their own plays, and I don't know if there is hardly any that calls their own plays that are in any of the big conferences nowadays. And it just, like I say, I learned a lot from Raymond Berry, and of course from our coaches. Chuck Purvis was a quarterback coach, and it's just advantage. It's just like defensive backs and offensive linemen blocking, how much harder it was to block back when we played. An offensive lineman's hands couldn't leave his chest. And, nowadays they can push him and do everything. It's a much easier game on people that play, whether it's the offensive line, whether it's the receivers, because the defensive backs can't bump and run them as much as they used to could do. And it's just it's a different game. It really is.
I had somebody tell me the other day that the two of you made watching and following and being at Baylor football fun again.
I don't know. I was out there taking a beating. I don't know how much fun it was, especially when Don threw the ball about 15 feet over my head. But I'm kidding you. Anyway.
You brought that up to me.
Yeah.
Was it TCU? The TCU game, it was like 28-26, and you're on their 25-yard line.
Yeah,
and you guys had some amazing moments, but that was not well over your head. That was just, you remember that pass, Don?
Fingertips. Remember that last out, and we were inside the 20, and I missed it on 4th down.
Well, I don't think I threw it high. I don't think I ever.
No, I didn't say that. I said it barely grazed my fingertips. Now,
I do remember one ball that I did throw high, which I hate to remember. It's when we played Texas, and we may get into that later. But
well, we can get that out of the way.
It was
now.
our last drive. We were behind 7-0, and if you can ever watch the film we went up and down the field. We never could get it in the end zone. We outgained them in yardage, et cetera, and then we were able to get a fumble late in the game and moved down to the 20-yard line, and we had like 4th down, and I had a drop back pass, and James Ingram was another receiver, and which was an advantage. Elkins was so good and made the defense so conscious of him they'd usually double team him or roll to his side, and it'd leave the other receivers one-on-one, and Ingram was one-on-one, and Ingram was a converted quarterback from Odessa that played under Fry, and then came to Baylor with Coach Fry, and he was in the end zone waving his arms, and he was wide open. And I jerked it back to throw it, and Staley Faulkner was a defensive lineman. They had two great defensive linemen, and Staley Faulkner on one side and Scott Appleton on the other. Mm-hmm. And Faulkner jumped up, and I kind of double clutched it and stepped up, and with my momentum stepping up and threw it, I threw it about 3 feet over Ingram's head. And Jim Hudson was a safety. And, of course, I became friends with him later. He played with the Jets and all. He's not with us anymore, unfortunately. But every time I'd see him, he'd say, I had him covered. He wouldn't have. I'd have got it. He was 10 yards away from him. But that's the one pass I remember probably more than anything.
That was Duke Carlisle who intercepted the pass.
Yeah.
Lawrence, did you slip on that play, or were you open, or you just –
I was open for a while, but he closed the gap really quickly. I don't know. He's a heck of an athlete. People don't realize that, and he was on it in a hurry. And another thing that we heard later is Ken Hodge at the line of scrimmage, our tight end, and he was a good one. That was Duke's boy. It's his man. And Hodge slipped down when the ball was snapped to him, and so that gave Carlisle a chance to look for somebody else.
Yeah, they had worked all week. I talked to a couple of guys, Hudson one of them being, and the rule was if your man didn't come out for any reason, know where Elkins is and go to wherever that area is and help double team him with whoever is on him. And sure enough, that's what happened. Hodge got bumped and knocked down, slipped down, and Carlisle immediately turned and ran. But if you look at a picture, there's a picture. I never saw it. I saw the picture. I didn't see it in the dining hall at UT. That was on the wall forever in there of the picture where Lawrence's hands are like this. The ball is right up here, and Duke Carlisle is short of him, and his hands are in between the ball and Lawrence's hands. So it was a hell of a play.
They won the national championship that year.
First one.
Somebody asked me this. I put up a note on the Sikkim 365 in the premium section. If there's a question you could ask Lawrence or Don, what would it be? One of them was, had you scored, let's say you caught it, 7-6, you go for 2?
I would have probably, if we had a timeout and huddled, we didn't have that great a field goal kicker, okay? Extra point kicker, whatever you want to call him. I think we'd have gone for 2. Because earlier, before when Lawrence, I believe, was a freshman, I was a redshirt, or maybe he wasn't there yet. I got to make the trip to the Gator Bowl. The Bridgers team played in '60. We played Florida, and it was the end of the game, and we scored, and it was 7-6, and they went for 2. And Ronnie Goodwin played the position that Lawrence played, and Ronnie ran a 6-yard out. And Ronnie Stanley threw the ball and hit him in the hands, and it just went right through his hands. So I feel like that's probably what we'd have done, and that's probably what we would have ran. But, history is history.
Because of the fact Texas had recruited you and wanted you, did that make that even more difficult? You had a chance to beat them?
I don't know. I didn't even think about it that way. I remember we lined up for an introduction before the game. And Olin Underwood, later judge down in Conroe, we'd become good friends, off season. And I looked over to him and I said, "How you doing, Olin?" He growled at me and spit on the ground. I said, "It's going to be a long day." And then one more thing, right fast. We're going up the steps out of the dressing room onto the field, and on every alternating in blood red steps, one said kill Trull, and the other said kill Elkins. And I thought, my goodness, what are we going to do?
Well, if that happened today with social media, can you imagine? Oh, my God, it'd be the lead story.
I'd have filed a lawsuit.
It'd been a hue and cry somewhere.
You mentioned Coach Bridgers, and then Coach Taft comes along later on and resurrects Baylor, the miracle on the Brazos. And then it was a long drought. Coach Briles gets him back-to-back Big 12 championships and competing at a national level. And then, of course, all hell broke loose. And then Matt Rule, 1-11 to a Sugar Bowl, almost won a Big 12 title. Now you have Dave Aranda, 2-7, and trying to turn things around. They've had a nice run with recruiting. What is it about Baylor that they're always resilient? Sometimes they can't help themselves, but what is it about the resiliency of Baylor football?
I don't know if you call it resiliency. I think it's just kind of like a cycle, when you go through bad times and you got to get the right guy at the right time with the right players. It's just one of those things. If you throw the ball, you got to have a good quarterback, you got to have receivers. If you run the ball, you got to have good linemen and you got to have good running backs. And it's just cyclical, like that. And fortunately, Baylor's been able to flip it. Once they have a bad year, hopefully they'll be able to flip it again with Aranda. I've got Lawrence and I have season tickets together at the game, so we're hoping it turns out a little better than last year.
Lawrence, the national championship in men's basketball. Did you feel like you were as much a part of that as anything because of?
I did. Really, I got all excited. I felt I belonged to Baylor, and they put a lot for everybody else on that table by winning it. Especially the way they beat Gonzaga that last game. They treated him like a step kid.
Yeah, they did. They beat him up badly. It's like Coach Few after the game, a few days later, weeks later, he's like, "Why were they so mad at us?" Well, because everyone was talking about Gonzaga. That was a fun team. That team was tough as nails. They were some dogs. I mean, angry pit bulls, and they played like it.
Yeah, and when I saw Gonzaga play U of H, of course I live in Houston now, I knew Baylor was going to win. If I was a betting man and had a lot of money, I would have put it on Baylor all the time because it's just U of H couldn't handle them, and or U of H, Gonzaga couldn't handle U of H. They almost, came close enough to beating them, and with their defense. And I knew Baylor's defense was twice as good as U of H's defense. And they had some great players and a great coach. Drew's done great. And it's just it's going to be interesting to see how they do next year because they're losing a bunch of guys.
Yeah, they are. A question for you. I know we've talked about Texas and a couple other. We'll do a little rapid fire here, then we'll go back to some other things. Most memorable game you've ever played in?
Blue Bonnet Bowl. '63 when we played LSU. I think LSU was ranked 8th or 9th in the nation, and we played down in Houston in Rice Stadium, and it was about, I don't know, 25, 28 degrees, something like that.
It was cold.
And misting. And we had a great, they double-team Elkins, and Ingram ended up being the most valuable lineman because they were all doubled up on Lawrence and everything, and I think Ingram caught like 12 or 13 passes that game. So we were able to adjust.
You had 12 catches against Texas. You had 10 against A&M in a game as well. And was there a game that was your most memorable? Was it Blue Bonnet Bowl?
Well, it was one of them. I think one of them was the TCU game when I was a sophomore. You know, I scored 3 that day.
Ran a punt back,
on
right?
The ball, ran a punt back 92 yards, and I didn't know I could run that far.
You exhausted?
And TCU didn't know I could either. But,
They wouldn't have punted it to you if they knew that, right? Well,
no, sideline Trull was one of them hollered, "Don't catch the ball, let it go." And then they was hollering, and I turned around and run it all the way back because they caught the ball on the 8-yard line going away from the kicker.
oh, so
toward the
you were
end
over
zone.
your shoulder type?
Yes.
Yeah.
And turned around and went all the way back. But Ingram got a good block on that one. Oh, he just wasted a couple of horn frogs.
Probably also, not to interrupt, but I think for both of us, Texas Tech game our senior year was one that was,
Yeah.
because we were behind like 9 points with maybe 5 minutes left or something like that,
Yeah.
and we scored twice to beat them.
What was a
In love with-
pregame?
I'm
Go ahead. I'm
sorry.
sorry.
Go ahead.
What was a pregame meal like? What did you get? Like what was it? Like now, God, it's
I think it was hot dogs, but
No, I thought it was horse meat. I know I shouldn't have said that.
peanut
We-
butter and jelly sandwiches.
We,
or-
I don't know. We didn't have much of a budget in those days, but I think we had 30-year-old cow steaks maybe. No, I'm making it. I got to apologize to Baylor on that one.
No, that's okay. When you see now what they have up and down University Parks, when you see McLean Stadium, which is a mile from where we are, and you see Waco has blossomed, and now they want to build a brand new basketball facility, a new football operations, a new welcome center. What do you think?
Say, welcome to the big time. But I'd always thought that the Badgers had a lot of money. Now I know. But anyway,
I was
here we
told a
go
long time
again.
ago that don't ever estimate how much money Baylor has when they need it.
That's what we were always thinking too.
well,
Yep.
and one thing in Coach Bridger's favor was back when he was a coach, I think his second year or third year, he started the I can't even remember what it was called now, where people will contribute money for, not realistically, but technically on paper, for scholarships to certain individuals. You'd have like someone that contributed your scholarship, donated, and he started that fundraiser, and it evolved and evolved, and now with the Bear Foundation and all the fundraising areas of contribution people can contribute has just exploded.
You got heavily involved in helping with that, with Billy Williams, and got him, I think, heavily involved. His name's on a lot of buildings of philanthropy. And were you someone that was able to talk to Billy? You probably would.
I talked to Billy a lot. Billy and I roomed together for 4 years, and of course we lost him here about a little over 2 years. Maybe it's been 3, but he was a great individual. I came from Oklahoma City, and I can remember our first meeting. Our freshman coach was Catfish Smith, and we were down at the bottom of Martin Hall, and he was introducing everybody. Catfish always had a name for everybody, and I was from Oklahoma, and he introduced me and said he's a bow and arrow kid from Oklahoma, and Billy and I got paired up as just potluck, I guess, for lack of a better term. Everybody else had somebody from their school or somebody they played against in high school, et cetera, as roommates. And we stuck together the whole time. And Billy got his knee torn up his first year and never really played and got active, but loved Baylor. loved golf. When he took his job, he became an executive with Owens Corning and really did well, and then left Owens Corning with 2 other executives from Owens Corning and started buying companies and flipping them. And one company they didn't flip, and Billy took it over up in Chicago and named Liquid Container and did tremendous with it, and then they sold out. And we talked a little, but it was all Billy's idea. Billy wanted to give back, and he loved golf. He was a member of Muirfield up in Jack Nicklaus's course, and had a grandson that was a very good high school golfer that came down here, didn't play golf down here, and just graduated this past year, his grandson. But Billy became friends with McGraw, the coach, and wanted to give something back to Baylor, and did the soccer facility first, and then did I guess they call it now the Billy, out there where when we were in school, that was the ROTC marching grounds, where they put the 2 greens and the golf training facility.
Another unbelievable part of
nice.
Baylor
really
facilities.
Nice.
Freshman football, you mentioned freshman football. So that's kind of how you got into coaching, right? Didn't Arkansas, Joe Gibbs?
Yeah, I had my pro career, and I was at Houston, and then I was at Boston 2 years, and then back to Houston, and then I went to Canada my last 2 years in 1970 and 71. And then after I retired from Canada, 72, I got a phone call from some guy named Joe Gibbs, and at that time nobody really knew who Joe Gibbs was unless you played with him or something. And he was on Frank Broyles' staff at University of Arkansas, and Frank, I guess, I really never talked to anybody, never really met Frank or anything other than shaking hands with him after the game or whatever, and he wanted me to be the head freshman coach. This was the last year that freshmen were eligible. And so I went up there and became the freshman coach, and then the next year moved up to varsity and was a backfield coach. We had Joe Gibbs as an offensive line coach and Jimmy Johnson, the defensive coordinator, and then Raymond Berry was on the staff as a receiver coach, and Merv Johnson, who was at Oklahoma forever, and Richard Williamson, who was from Alabama, that I think coached at Memphis and maybe somewhere else, and then Bill Lewis was secondary coach, and he coached at Wyoming after he left Arkansas. So we had a great staff. People say, well, how'd y'all do? Did y'all win the national championship? I said, well, our first year when we were all together, we went 6-4. And you got to have the players. It doesn't matter how good your coaching is. One thing Frank did, I guess, place emphasis on more than anything, prior to me coming to Arkansas in my first 2 years, Frank came into our coach's office one day and said, we're going into inner city. In Arkansas, they got a lot of rural kids, rural black guys out of Arkansas, and Frank wanted to balance it out a little more, but he wanted us to go in inner city, going after black kids also, which it strengthened the program. And 2 guys I recruited from Houston, R.C. Thielman and Greg Cook, one played at Atlanta, and Greg played with Green Bay. And I left Arkansas after my third year, and the next year they won the Southwest Conference. Arkansas did. So I was felt like I had a lot of Mike Kirkland from Pasadena was a quarterback, and I recruited him. But it's just Arkansas was kind of a touchy situation with what all happened over there with Faubus and all way back at at Central High School and everything.
Yeah.
And
Johnson won 2 Super Bowls. Gibbs won 3 Super Bowls, and I know that Raymond Berry was a part of some as a coach and a player, right?
Yeah, and Raymond was at New England.
Yeah.
Who's
the best coach you ever had?
Goodness, I don't
Anyone
know.
like
I'd
those
say,
names I just mentioned?
Well, I'd say Coach Bridgers, but you can't forget Gordon Wood, because he showed up my senior year at Brownwood High. We were picked 5th in our district and won the first championship in the history of the town, in the state. He had we didn't have much talent, but he had us mean, in better shape than anybody. I thought that was the meanest guy I'd ever seen. I mean, you couldn't do anything to please him, especially if he was one of the team captains. He'd
Pushed you pretty hard?
Pushed pretty hard, dressed you down. You thought you did a good job, but evidently you didn't.
Won a state championship.
Sure did. First one ever.
And he ended up winning a bunch of them in the end. So in a matter of just a football season, he flipped everything at Brownwood.
Oh, he did. Made everybody proud of the town, and all of a sudden here comes 3M and Superior Cables and Kohler, and everything just took off from there. And then he retired in the early 80s. They hadn't won one since.
No, they've had some pretty good runs.
And they said it's the players, but I don't know.
Do you remember hosting Walter Abercrombie at your house one night?
Yes, I did.
What are you laughing for?
We were having a little golf tournament out there trying to raise money, and I convinced Walter to come out to the lake, and he played golf that day, and he needed to take a shower. I had forgotten to turn the hot water on. I mean, and he never complained. And that's probably the coldest water on earth, out of the well. Oh.
Yeah, he wanted me to bring that up, by the way. He said, hey, ask him about that time I spent the night and I froze to death taking a shower.
I didn't know they had hot water out in Brownwood.
Well,
where'd y'all get that?
It just came in, but anyway. And he didn't complain, didn't say a word, but he's tough. I'd have been screaming.
Yeah, no, that's one of those that sometimes just randomly, wherever you're taking the shower, and when it doesn't get warm, you just have to have almost courage to get underneath of that, and it's about a 30-second shower.
But old Walter proved he was tough that evening.
College Football Hall of Fame, I mentioned it off the top. You were inducted in '93.
Yeah, I think so.
Don, 2013.
Correct.
You were in Saudi Arabia. That's another part of your life that we'll get into in the Middle East. And in your induction speech, you said something about, I would never have missed this because this isn't for 1 year or for 4 years. This is forever. What did that mean to you?
Well, I spent a lot of time in that desert by myself. And I don't know, I just thought how great it was to get selected to that thing. Out of all the people that played football in America since its outset, our onset, and then to have Don and me in that thing, that was something.
Did it make it complete when he finally was introduced?
Oh yeah, I was pushing for him. I'd remember I'd call old Archie, and I'd go to those things, and that's why I went in 2000 trying to pump you up to get in there. You know, talking to Switzer and the old boy from Tennessee, Johnny Majors.
Johnny Majors, yeah.
And I was tickled when they finally selected him.
It was the last year you were eligible?
Yeah, you're only eligible 50 years from the date you play your senior year. So 63 was my senior year, so I've had a chance to get in 50 years from then, which 2013 was the last year of my eligibility.
I'm a voter on that, and it's a list every year. You sit there and go, my gosh, I can only pick 8 or 12 or whatever, and then there's a division.
Yeah.
What did you ever give up that you would get in?
I didn't give up, and speaking of my roommate a while ago, Billy, I think probably Billy had a lot to do with it. He got involved with them also, pushing them and sending them letters, and which I'm sure, I know it helped.
What did you do when you got the call?
I was on my patio outside, and it was Archie. Archie called. I think Archie calls everybody at the time. I don't know who was chairman when you were.
He wasn't there yet.
He wasn't there yet, but he was chairman of the National Football Foundation. I was very shocked, but very appreciative, and at last.
There's Montana and Rice. There is Clayton, Duper, and Marino, and there's passing combinations. RG3, Kendall Wright, among many others that have been the more modern-day quarterbacks and receivers, the great receivers that Baylor's had as well. And there's obviously Trull and Elkins.
Yeah, I'm happy to hear that. You wonder how good were we compared to everybody else, and a different time, I told Don if it was today, I wouldn't even make the team.
No, that's not right.
Well, that's how I felt. But
Instead of catching 70 one year, you'd probably catch 140.
well, I don't know. Yeah,
Because we didn't throw ever down.
Yeah.
You know, we had a running game. We had to have a running game to have a little balance and everything. But I think when I got inducted to the Texas Hall of Fame, Art was in the audience, Bryles, and I looked at him and I said, I wish I'd have played for you also. I love Coach Bridgers, but having a chance in that offense as a quarterback and as a receiver, of course, there's so many receivers, you spread it around a lot more. But we spread it around pretty good. Lawrence caught 70 his senior year. And Ingram, I think, caught 58, and we had 2 tight ends. One caught 30 and one caught 20. So we spread it around pretty good. Didn't throw a lot to the halfbacks.
Both of you you played in the National Football League or the AFL or the NFL. You mentioned the WFL, the Canadian Football League. You've been all around. And then you even mentioned a couple other leagues you were a part of as well. You guys had a chance to play and had some sporadic success. You broke your collarbone?
Well, that was one of the injuries. First thing was Don led me in a goalpost, and I got wrapped around it.
Wait a second. Before I take credit for leading him to the goalpost, we played an exhibition game against the Jets. Their rookie year with Namath was a rookie. So they had it back then, exhibition games, they would put them in places where players on each team may have had a college connection or something from that area. So we played in Arlington, Virginia. Namath was a rookie quarterback, and we played at a high school stadium, and the goalposts were on the goal line. Two standers, not just one, 2. And so we were on about the 10-yard line and threw kind of what we threw at Baylor, like a quick post. Lawrence caught it and looked up, and that standard was right there, and he planted, and I think the plant tore his leg up more than the hit.
Can you believe that they did? I mean, it took forever for that. It's like, well, whose idea was it? Let's stick these 2 things in the field of play.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So you had the knee injury or the leg injury and then also a collarbone. You ever feel like, what if?
Well, I have thought about that more than once, and I was supposed to be at the college all-star game that night. The Houston Oilers told them I was hurt, but they put me in the game, and I got hurt. They got fined $2,500 for playing me illegally in a game where I never was the same, really.
Who told me about a road trip when you played, or someone's mentioned that you were someone with the Oilers, and you had a road trip, and you guys had to drive to the road trip. Mike Holloway was either the coach or the general manager. You're at a team hotel, and they said, "Don't put the beds down, so we can get just half price. They won't charge us full price for the room."
This is when I was in Boston. Mike Holloway.
Oh, it's the Patriots.
When I was
Okay,
with the Patriots.
all right.
And I'd got traded after the 4th game of 1967 from the Oilers, and I was kind of ready to get out of the Oilers because there was a bunch of coaching situations with Bud Adams and the coaching changes and all, and it was very unstable. And so I said, "Oh, great, man, I'm going to Boston, and they've got Jim Nantz, man, it'll take the heat off the passer and all." And so we're getting ready to go play an exhibition game against the Jets, and it's I can't even remember where it was, but we took a train. It was close, and we took a train, and on the Friday after practice, or right before practice, the coach was meeting with us all, saying we're going. And Holloway never looked at the guys when he talked to them. He'd look up at the ceiling, guys, and he had that New England accent. Guys, we're going up to play the Jets over in wherever it was, and he says, "I want you to do me one favor." And of course, Boston had some good years with Jim Nantz, Babe Parilli, and Gino Cappelletti. They were the 3 guys kind of that were the leaders of that team. And he says, "I want y'all to do me a favor. Since it's exhibition game, it's so close. We're going over on the train on Saturday." And the game was Saturday night. We weren't spending the night. And he said, "We're going over Saturday. And I want y'all to just get off your feet, watch a college game and everything, but I want you to do me a favor." He says, "Don't turn the covers back because we get a better rate if we don't mess the bed up." I hope I won't get X-rated here, but Cappelletti said, Coach, when we go into the restroom, he said, they've got that deal, that piece of paper over the toilet seat. Should we tear it or leave it in place? I swear. And you know, people wouldn't believe that today. I mean, that's the way, because Holloway later came to the Oilers as general manager and was signing $1 million contracts to
left
guys,
and right.
you know.
You had a chance to play at two different places. You were drafted, right? But in the AFL and NFL?
Yeah.
You picked the Oilers. What did Bud Adams promise you?
Oh, one of those same things they promised Appleton, a Phillips 66 service station that I'd get 20 years down the road.
A gas station, like
Gas
an
station.
old-fashioned full service like we never see anymore.
Right.
A gas station.
That was it.
20 years later, you were going to get that.
Yeah, and 20 years later, I had a lot of other people had their hands out to get part of that station too. But that's another
So
story.
your bonus baby ended up in the hands of somebody else then, right?
Yeah, I'll tell you what. Donnie Anderson said, Elkins, you want me to give you part of my bonus? Because I was #1 draft choice for Lombardi at Green Bay. Donnie was the #1 future choice since he flunked out of school his freshman year at Texas Tech. So when they didn't sign me, they signed him the next year for $942,000. Wow. About 5 times what I signed for the year before, but which is more money than I ever seen in my life anyway.
Wait a minute. You had a chance to play for Vince Lombardi and the Green Bay Packers?
3 world championships. And I saw him.
By the way, that would have trumped Gordon Wood being mean, because you know how tough Lombardi was. Players loved him. They hated him. They loved him, though. But he won.
I'd have probably snuck out in the middle of the night and headed back to Brownwood, maybe. But I don't know. I met him. Tom Fears drove me to a little Catholic chapel at the side of Love Field early on Sunday morning after we'd finished playing Rice here the afternoon before. And I see this little old guy with this little fedora and that gap teeth, and I didn't know who he was. I really didn't. And me, I hadn't heard much of Lombardi. And he looked at me with an old toothy grin. He said, son, I've never drafted a pass catcher #1, but to me, you're the best third down receiver in America and college, and all I want you to do is catch 3rd and long from Bart Starr. And I guess I should have taken that to heart.
Wow. So instead of you, it was Boyd Dowler, Carroll Dale, Max McGee.
But I might have gotten splinters on a Green Bay bench. I don't know.
Oh, I think they maybe got splinters.
Yeah. I don't know. But they, and all those people were 6'4", 6'5", and I'm 6'1". So,
what kind of pass did he throw? Was it an easy catch pass? Is it like tight spiral kind of?
Unless he threw it in the bleachers. No, I was kidding you.
He says that about you a lot.
I mean, we'll not talk about him in a minute.
Anyway, he learned the technique of, I don't know, it's like it. Y'all had that deal about throwing against the gym wall with that mat there, and if you right-handed and it fell to the right, then you had the nose up properly, or was it reversed?
Backwards.
Backwards. Okay.
Backwards.
Well, I wasn't a quarterback
right.
either.
As long as you catch him, you don't know how they bounce. Okay.
But he I guess something about throwing his wrist out.
Oh yeah.
And bringing the nose up, and if that nose is up, you're gonna have a lot easier time catching it. And he never threw a hard pass. He really didn't.
So very catchable.
Very catchable.
You can see sometimes on games, some quarterbacks, when you release the ball, your 2 last fingers is like that. People don't realize when you throw a football, it's like that. And some guys throw it like this.
Baseball.
Like a baseball, and it nose down, and you can see a guy running it, especially short passes, in the flat route or a crossover route, and it hits them right in the hands, and they don't catch it, but it's because it's coming in there with the nose down, which means they're only getting the bottom, or as it turns out, the top half of the ball into their hands, and it slips through. And Coach Purvis was my quarterback coach and got with me, and I spent hours and hours over in Rena Mars McLean Gymnasium in the summertime, 5 days a week, throwing balls into the mat and into the backboard. I do it at different levels. Coach Purvis was writing his master's on the art of throwing the forward pass, or his doctor's, I guess it was, and had it Pierce. I don't know if you remember the guy. What was Pierce's first name, or the guy that filmed our games?
Yeah.
I can't remember. His name was Pierce.
I'll say Franklin Pierce.
But he was always over
president.
there, and they got shots from him behind, and we had tape over the nose of the ball four times, and you could see it, whether it was up or down, and then it, like Lawrence said, if it came straight back or went to the left. The majority of the time it come straight back. I mean, I could get 10 feet from the mat under a basketball goal and throw it and catch it a bunch, more times than not.
Lombardi mentioned his third down and his ability, clutch passes. You've thrown, Ingram had 58 catches and Lawrence had 70, and then you threw to a lot of others throughout your career. What was it like to have him as your...
Well, it was great. Lawrence, probably his biggest attributes were, number one, he had a great pair of hands. He's a big bone individual and has very strong hands. Can't even tell you about his brothers. They had strong hands. About the one that can, what is it, a nickel or a penny?
No, quarter. Rip a quarter in
He can
two.
rip a quarter in two.
Your brother could...
His brother.
No, my older brother
older
could
rip a quarter in half?
quarter in two like this, and you can't even take metal shears and cut it in two.
No, you're going to
And
ruin
he'd
the
just do
shears.
that and then rip it. And I told him, "Why don't you tell anybody? We could have made $1 million in Vegas on you."
Like some show.
He was the strongest guy I've ever seen. Wasn't that big? It just had these big old gnarled hands. And
Okay, let me finish
Yeah,
telling
I'm
about
sorry. Go ahead.
your abilities. And he was a great athlete in high school. Of course, I didn't know anybody from Texas other than I played in the old Oil Bowl.
Oil Bowl, yeah.
When Ronnie Goodwin was on the other team. Trying to think, two other people, maybe Bert Tate and one other one. Unfortunately, we've lost them too. It's just I've been going to so many funerals here in the last 2 years. It's terrible. But anyway, Lawrence, just besides being a great athlete and having great hands, was his break out of a route, whether you're running a sideline route, whether you're running a post route, or whether you're running a comeback route. Lawrence acceleration off the break was the best I've ever seen. Guys in the pros I played with Charlie Hennigan with the Oilers, who was all pro with AFL. But Lawrence had the ability to come off a break, and I think it was probably from his track. He was a great quarter miler in high school. Great quarter mile. That's one of the toughest races there is in track. And he had that ability, and then he could catch the ball and could take a lot of punishment because I didn't throw him perfect all the time. And sometimes he had to go up high or stop and catch it from behind and all. But and let me add one other thing, which going into the pros, the biggest thing in the pros, you got to be in the right place at the right time with the right coaches. And if you don't have that, it doesn't matter how good you are. And I'm saying this not on my behalf, but on his behalf.
both of them.
Lawrence, coaches don't know how to coach people. That was one ability that Coach Bridgers had. You can't coach every player exactly the same. Mm-hmm. And that's a coaching trait I learned from Coach Bridgers, which I hope I used at Arkansas with players, because there's some guys that you've got to pamper a little bit and agree with them a little bit instead of holler at them and cuss them out. And there's some you got to holler out and cuss them out, and they play that much better. But Lawrence was the kind of guy, Bridgers knew how to handle Lawrence. And Lawrence, on like Monday or Tuesday after we'd played on Saturday, we'd be at practice and say, "Where's Lawrence, man?" And Coach Bridgers said, "Oh, well, he was hurting a little bit. He was inside." Or for Lawrence got out of more Monday and Tuesday practices than anybody.
Did you really?
And on Tuesday, I was down at the Union Building at Hot Chocolate Hour looking at all the AOs and the Athenians.
And they're out there practicing.
And we're out there practicing, and
Coach
Bridgers,
I didn't do
he knew
that
how to get
every
into
week.
Coach Bridgers' soft spot. Coach Bridgers knew how to treat you.
It's a start treatment, right?
And he had come out, he had missed practice up to Thursday or Friday, when it's short practices, and he'd come out on the weekend and catch 15 passes,
Both of you, post-football, have been everywhere. I mean, you were in Africa, you were in Europe, you were in Saudi Arabia forever.
Yeah.
The Minister of Water. You
No,
worked for the Ministry of Water?
I worked for them, yeah.
You were the Minister of Water. Now you worked for the Ministry of Water. You told me last night when we talked on the phone about all of the different places you've been, whether it's been in the banking business, the renovation business, the whatever. I mean, you guys, you've been around.
It's not our first rodeo, that's for sure.
Yeah. And so how did you get involved in Saudi Arabia? And it was an oil company, correct?
No, it was a Saudi Arabian Ministry of Water and Power. I applied for the job. I had a big full-page ad in the Houston Chronicle, and I was a little short on cash at that time, I think, and I had to do something. You know, one of the midlife crisis deals. I had to have a job. And here's all this stuff, all this list of jobs in Saudi Arabia with something called a Saline Water Conversion Corporation. I applied for the job and baffled them so much with stuff. They had a Saudi and an Englishman interviewed me. And I pulled things on them, and I remembered my organic chemistry a little bit, and I baffled them so much. Out of 232 applicants, they hired me.
Can you spell organic?
I can spell in.
Oh my God! Dickie Magel helped you get a job in the Brown and Root? Is that right?
Brown and Root, yes, sir.
He's kind of a famous college football name, huh? Dickie Magel.
He was,
yeah.
and
Dickie had a motel right by Rice on South Main, right by the medical center, called the Tidelands Inn, and had a club upstairs where they had name entertainment. I mean, like, I can't even think of it. They're older people. People wouldn't know who they are now. They weren't rappers, that's for sure. But he was a great player at Rice. He was one that had the famous getting tackle off the bench by Tommy. Was it Lewis?
At Alabama.
From Alabama in the Cotton Bowl. Yeah. But we became friends with Dickie because he'd always kind of have a lunch every Monday after games, and a bunch of old cronies that would go to the games. And fortunately, Elkins and I sometimes would get to go over and all and discuss what happened the last week at the game and all. And we became friends, and Lawrence became friends with him, and it was very interesting.
So you had that entertainment club, whatever, the Dickie Magel at his hotel. Johnny Carson Tonight Show.
Yeah.
Robert Duvall with movies, and Sammy Baugh. I mean, did you ever think he got a little bit highfalutin? Don, he was
he never got highfalutin. I don't think that's possible.
What was the name of the movie? Tender Mercies, and then there was Lonesome Dove, and he brought you to the Academy Awards?
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, I thought I was in tall cotton then.
I bet.
Riding in Duvall's limousine to the Academy Awards with Wilford Brimley, who was a great old actor.
Oh, yeah.
I spent 2 years in a TV series being his stunt double, and I was 8 inches taller than him. Figure that one out. But anyway.
The Johnny Carson show was in '64. You were on the cover of, was it Sports Illustrated? Okay, and then it was an article about Baylor with you and Lawrence and Coach Bridgers. And then you guys seriously think about this. And then you're fourth in the voting for the Heisman Trophy one year.
Correct.
Look magazine, I think. You guys.
Look All-American. We both
Look All-American. I mean, this.
Yeah, we were fortunate.
Very fortunate.
So was Baylor.
Well,
so. Baylor gave us an education, and we didn't have to pay for it.
Yeah,
right?
for him, of course, he was a Blake Scholar in math and was a GTE Academic All-American, 3 times?
Yeah.
And Staubach wasn't. I didn't. I get in trouble for that one.
No.
Hey, Staubach wins the Heisman in '63 because all the voting's east of the Mississippi River.
All of
You realize that?
No, yeah, there's a lot.
Heisman
Yeah.
votes.
What was that? Was there actually a ceremony?
No
What
ceremony.
was that like? Because I know
It
it's
was different.
changed. I've seen it change in my lifetime.
Yeah, no ceremony back then.
They just what did?
They just announced it. Didn't have it on TV or anything.
Can you believe how? And I'm kind of torn on this. Everything now is like, golly, you have a 2-hour pregame and you have this music and bands, and it's just, I guess, what maybe people want. It's gotten to the point now where they drag it out for hours, and it's because they can make money off of it, you know. And now it's a bit. When RG3 won it, And you were, again, so close in 63. What did that mean to you as a quarterback
Well, I
as
thought
well?
it was great, and I became friends with RG while he was here and everything. And I see now, what was it I just saw in the paper where he's getting interviewed already for doing
Analyst work, yeah.
doing analyst work after the season. And he's a good guy, smart guy, talented athlete, of course, and as we all know, and very humble guy too. And like I say, I think the worst injustice for him was when he was with the Redskins and he was injured, and the coach
Shanahan,
know the father-son, and leaving him in there or putting him in there, which hurt him bad.
Yeah, there was a lot of that organization's a mess.
And that's like what I said earlier about being in the right place, the right time, the right coaching staff.
Because his rookie year, boy,
it's all got to click.
He was unbelievable.
Yes, he was.
And they allowed him to be him as well. You were in Saudi Arabia how long?
14 years and 2 months. Left in the middle of the night.
Why?
Well, people
Tell them
decided,
about your friends.
What?
Tell them about your friends, the Bedouins.
Oh, the Bedouins got me out of town. They thought I looked like a CIA person, and I told them I couldn't spell intelligence.
Or CIA.
They became very unhappy with me overnight, and that was probably due to Bush's shock and awe when he bombed the Iraqis and didn't faze them any. And I told them, they didn't hear me, you're bombing the wrong people. Hey, boy, I was in trouble. Those people turned on me.
Wow.
They used to be my friends, and overnight they were not.
And you had to leave in the middle of the night? Were you scared for your life?
Not exactly, but I've embellished it a little bit. But I had an old Bedouin that I befriended for years, and his name was Thabit Soweto Al-Luhibi, which is a tribal name out in those sand hills. And he come by my office one morning, he's always got this old toothy grin. Mr. Lawrence. I said, yeah, Mr. Thabit, how you doing? He said, have you ever considered when you might want to leave Saudi Arabia? And I said, I don't know, Mr. Thabit. What do you think? He said, well, how about Omps? Omps is yesterday in Arabic. And boy, I knew I was in trouble then.
So you suggested the wrong country was getting hammered.
Yeah, but it didn't have anything to do with Saudi Arabia. I was wondering why they were bombing the Iraqis when they didn't have any weapons of mass destruction. They'd been shoved into Syria all these years. They didn't have.
I was going to ask you about Saudi Arabia. I was going to ask you that. I was like, when you were there, did you see? Because you hear, and of course, there's so many different things in politics or whatever. And, I mean, did you see tension all the time, or I mean, was it?
No, it was just when we loaded them up, during the Gulf War. Mm-hmm. They weren't used to that. They didn't like it. You had our Marine women guards in shorts and no abayas, no whatever it is they have on their head, and it just freaked them out. And it freaked Ben Laden out, too. He was kind of neutral. He didn't like us, but that really put him over the edge when he saw all them women running around with not many clothes on. And that's just between me and you and the wall.
And Sikkim 365.
I was going to say.
Yes, I've done that, yeah.
Dutch Schrader.
Yes, sir.
What did he mean to you, and what do you think you meant to him?
Well, we didn't mean much to each other when I showed up at Baylor. I'd do things that make him so mad. And since Bridgers was my boss, he couldn't do much about it. And Miss Becky, his daughter, was wondering who he was mouthing off about at the supper table every night. She found out about 50 years later it was me. He was complaining about that dadgum Elkins at the supper table. You know what he did in my PE class? Because I took an elective with him, different PE things. And one time, a fast story here, it had rained at Minglewood Bowl used to be down on the right side of, or back of Martin Hall.
Brooks and Martin, yeah.
Yeah. And it rained one night, and Waco Creek was running. And so it was hitting principals the next day, and they had these big old, 16-inch, the old slow pitch softballs. Had 6 brand new ones. So he said, Elkins, get up there and bat. And I got up there, he threw me 6 pitches. I hit 6 of those big balls over everything into Waco Creek, and it floated to the Brazos.
Brand new ball's gone.
And he was so mad at me because there went all his softballs, and class couldn't do anything. Oh, he was seething. You know, just things like that.
So what happened when you started dating his daughter?
Oh, Lord. Nothing much, because I'd been coming by and taking him to different places. We got to be good friends. I was his chauffeur, his driver. He bragged about that. Everybody knew. Guess who my driver is?
Lawrence Elkins.
We went to Houston and Dallas and everywhere, and we kept him, you know, the last couple of years of his life, and it was tough.
John McClain told me a story. Of course, you guys know both John, Waco, Trib, and then, of course, now the Chronicle, Hall of Fame writer. He said that when he was a Little League baseball player, you used to go to some of the Little League practices and show kids, you know, how to play the game, or even try to teach them how to throw a curveball.
Yeah, I remember
You spent time doing, you remember
yes,
that?
Yeah, I remember that. And I remember I gave him my chin strap after a Baylor game, and Trull wouldn't give his. But I made that up.
I was going to say.
Anyway.
Don Trull played in the NFL, played with, did you actually, were in the AFL, right, too?
AFL.
AFL, I'm sorry. The WFL with the Shreveport Steamer.
Before that, it first was the Houston Texans, not like the current one.
Right.
A guy named Steve Arnold from California is the guy that put the cash in and everything. And then we played almost a season in the Astrodome, and he ran out of money. And then the franchise was sold to Shreveport. And then we went to Shreveport Steamer. And
What about the game in which you guys were supposed to play and you didn't have your uniforms?
we went over to Shreveport, and most of us stayed in the Holiday Inn because it was the end of one season. I think we had 5 or 6 games left. And Garland Boyette, who was a linebacker with the Cardinals and came with the Oilers, and he also went to Shreveport. I went to WFL with Houston, and then we went to Shreveport. And he was kind of the defensive captain. I guess I was the offensive captain because I was a lot older than most of the guys there and everything. And I got a call on a Wednesday from a dry cleaners, and it didn't know me from a hole in the ground, but knew I was a quarterback, and said, this is Bill Brown, and I'm with so-and-so cleaners, and we clean y'all's uniforms, and we haven't been paid in 3 weeks for the last 3 games. And y'all are playing Friday night or Saturday night. I can't even remember what night it was. And we can't let the uniforms go till we get everything back paid current, you know, or y'all aren't going to play. And so Garland and I talked, and we met with the team. And so I called an attorney, and we attached the gate receipts in Shreveport where nothing would get paid until the dry cleaners was paid with the gate receipts, and then it was whatever else it went to was after that. It was an experience. Then, after that game, we always meet on Monday, come out on Monday, and, you know, it wasn't as many guys there, and I saw a guy putting a helmet in a bag and a guy putting a jersey in another bag, and didn't see any coaches or anything at all. And so I picked up a couple of footballs and put them in a bag, and that was the last.
That was it.
That was it. Everybody was getting what they could get.
These leagues, I mean, the AFL was good enough, strong enough, had enough star power, Al Davis, among others as owners, to eventually force the NFL into a merger. But the other ones, they just come and go. The WFL, the USFL made a run with the great superstars like Steve Young and Herschel Walker and all the others, and they eventually ran themselves into the ground. And the XFL never, and the Spring League.
Did you ever get paid all your money?
I'm still waiting on it.
That's what I thought. Still waiting on salary from those days.
From the WFL?
WFL, yeah.
You'll never get it, man.
No, I don't think I will.
Never going to get it. Joe Gibbs, I went back to him for a second. I told you how much I think he's just, my God.
Great guy.
Now in NASCAR, he's won numerous NASCAR championships. He's just quiet, kind of looks like a cerebral, quiet guy, the glasses and all that. And I remember when he took over what was then the Washington Redskins, now the Washington football team, they got off to a rugged, kind of a tough start, and they weren't, Cook wasn't so sure, but then the rest is history. One of the greatest winning percentages, 3 Super Bowls. You saw him and his competitive edge, how?
It was an interesting story. When I got a phone call from him, and like I said, I didn't know who he was. He told me I'm on Coach Broyles' staff here at the University of Arkansas, and Coach Broyles would like you to come up here and visit with him about maybe coaching the freshman team. And so I went up there and visited, and I was very impressed with the whole situation, and so I ended up going to Arkansas to be the head freshman coach. And my first 2 or 3 weeks, of course, my wife and family were still in Houston, and I lived in the dormitory in a single room. And of course, as I'd mentioned earlier, the staff was Raymond Berry and Jimmy Johnson, et cetera. And so everybody's trying to be nice to me, asking me to come to their house for dinner because I was up there by myself and all. And so you was talking about Joe being quiet and everything. He kind of had a devious laugh. I don't know if you've ever heard him laugh, and I was kind of like, like that. And so he said, hey, you don't play racquetball by any chance, do you? And I happened to play racquetball when I was in Houston. And I said, yeah, I play racquetball. He said, well, after practice or before practice, why don't we meet over at the racquetball courts and we'll play? I said, okay. And so, Joe was kind of pudgy and was a lineman, and yeah, and I was a quarterback, and thought, I'll go give him a game, And he wore me out on the racquetball court, and he didn't mind doing it. I mean, he beat me like 21-4, and next game he didn't take no quarters. He beat me about the same again, I mean, he was a heck of a player. And the other thing that was unusual about him, which shows now in his later years, he had a motorcycle. And he used to race motorcycles.
So a little edge, yeah, a little.
And that's, I'm sure, and then he got into the NASCAR and everything, and been very successful at it.
Okay, I mentioned Joe Gibbs it made me think of another question. Dave Aranda is you could see him. He's not a scream yeller. We mentioned it. Everyone has different personalities. And whenever we've mentioned Dave Aranda, and of course when you're 2-7, people go, he doesn't care enough, or it doesn't mean anything, just because Tony Dungy, Lovie Smith, there's others, Tom Landry, rarely ever exploded on the sideline, maybe once or twice. And then you have the ones who are rugged and rough, whether it's Lombardi or Knoll or whoever, Parcells. Dave Aranda has that quiet demeanor, and obviously last year was a nightmare because of COVID. Your thoughts of Dave Aranda and year 2, because they're in this little stretch here where now people can actually come to Baylor. Prospects can get on campus. They can have official or unofficial visit, and they're kind of in a nice little run here with recruiting.
Yeah, as you mentioned, last year was kind of let's just throw it out and start over, so to speak, year. And I've always said, and I'm not saying it in this case, I'm just in generalities, when a defense coordinator takes a head job, and there's been some very successful ones, like Joe Gibbs. He was a defense coordinator in college, and of course Aranda was very successful at LSU and all. He's only as good as his offensive coordinator, when he gets a head job, and that's my firm belief, because defense you don't have to worry about, okay? And I'm not saying this derogatory or anything. Coach Aranda may know a lot about offense, but you're only as good as your offensive staff and your offensive assistant. So hopefully, and I thought last year, and I can't even remember who the offensive coordinator was.
Larry Fedora.
Fedora, had a pretty good track record. I thought I didn't know him that much about him and all, and I thought that we were going to be good. Okay, for whatever reason, we weren't offensively, whether it be COVID, didn't have the players, et cetera, et cetera. Now he's got his new staff, or not new staff, but new staff on the offensive side, and let's hope it pans out, because I feel like they got the players I think the quarterback situation, of course, on any team is the key to your offense. And
they got a nice little young, talented, but just inexperienced kind of a raw group that they'll try to find out what they can do.
Bring along and see who should be in there.
You guys have season tickets at, I don't know how many games you were able to go to because there weren't many, but Lawrence, when you watch an offense struggle, and first, second, third down, and 3rd and 5 seemed like it was, you might as well punt. And I'm not trying to be flippant. How hard was it to watch that as a guy that was a part of a prolific offense, or just someone who loves Baylor?
I just quit saying catch the dadgum football. I gave up on that too. But anyway, I don't know much about the game like Don does. He watches all the chess on there, and I just watch where the ball goes. That's me as a fan. I hear all these people saying they should have been in this formation, that technique, and I wonder who are they? You know, when Trull, he knows what he's talking about. But he said, "Did you see that?" And I said, "See what?" I was looking at the ball.
Well, most fans watch where the ball is, the center, the snap, and that's it.
And what we watch more than anything up there is how the secondary covers receivers.
Yeah.
And there would be times in any game where people are overplayed or underplayed and the defense is inside and you should be throwing outside and the team tries to throw it inside, or vice versa. If a guy's playing outside shoulder, it's a heck of a lot easier to throw it inside. You know, and where the safeties are, you know, that's one thing back when Rule was here, and he did a great job, but his defense sometimes, and they changed it up in the last couple of years, where the two safeties were turning around and start backing up before the ball's ever snapped. I mean, you know, like a cover, I don't know what they call it. We'd call it cover 3 or cover 5 when I was playing. And you just can't do that. It tips your hand. And if you're playing against a team that can adjust on the fly, so to speak, it's tough to defend them.
Yeah, that last year, though, man, my God, they were unbelievable. And that last year's defense, you could see it. As you mentioned, the defense still, a couple of times they got grilled pretty good. We brought up the 1963 season and that game with Texas, and obviously the end of the game was wow. It was so close, and yet it didn't end well. How much did he take that loss on his own shoulders?
I thought he blamed it on me. No, I'm just
is this when the applause sign is supposed to get?
Yes, that was. No, I felt badly. Of course, I felt pretty hurt too. Don was having his mouth and lips sewed up at halftime, where one of their players hit him with an elbow after the whistle blew, and he was on top of a pile.
Tommy Ford.
Yep. Tommy Ford, and I
got the name and license number.
Yeah. And
that's now on record.
And I had 2% xylocaine stuck in both ankles because they were hurting so bad I couldn't run. So I had assisted running in the second half, and you know, you don't broadcast that back in those days, but when it wore off, I was in trouble.
Well, we actually had two plays. I talked about the one at the end of the game,
right.
Elkins, where he down and out, and here come Carlisle. But it was the first or second series. We would always, one thing about Coach Bridgers, he wasn't afraid to take chances. And we would always put a play in or two for a particular team every week. We'd do it, an unusual play. Against LSU, we did what called the alumni pass. Bridgers was funny. He'd say, "We're going to call this an alumni pass. This is just for the alumni." And it was a double reverse pitchback, and we had a guy slow play and then go deep. But then Lawrence would pitch it back to me, and then he would continue on down the sidelines. Well, we had that for LSU, and we did it, and the wide receiver was covered, but they forgot about Lawrence going around the left. And that was the first time I ever threw it to Lawrence after he had pitched me the ball going, you remember that,
Yeah,
going to the left.
I slid under Charlie Mack, knocked his feet out from
on
under
the bench over there.
Charlie McClendon.
Oh, yeah.
But then in the Texas game, I think it was the first series, maybe in the second series, right in front of their bench. It was our bench on the right side. And it was kind of a wet day. you know, and all. But
windy, cold.
we ran Lawrence on like out and up, and he's wide open. And I didn't want to overthrow him, but I'd like to hit him in stride, you know, and end up hanging up there and I only caught it, and they kind of got him, you know, from behind. He gained, I don't know, maybe 30 or 40 yards. But if I'd had it out there, he would have scored because they weren't going to catch him. But anyway, you know, there's plays like that you remember and stick in your mind.
How often do you guys talk?
Not very.
Yeah. But it's like you are connected forever.
Yeah,
Oh,
we
yeah.
are. But compared to him, I have a limited vocabulary, so it's hard to talk to him.
We talk, I don't know, maybe every 2 or 3
But you
weeks.
see each other at functions and some things like that. And then last year, of course, was hard. He said he was a prankster and that you were the serious one.
Yeah, that's it.
Do you remember anything he may have done as a prankster or...
When we were rookies, I think, wasn't it you pulled the deal on Charlie Frazier? When we were at Kerrville?
No, I didn't.
Snake, did you do the snake deal?
I did the snake deal, but that was on, I thought it was you and Bethard.
No.
Well, who did put that rattlesnake between whose beds that night?
It wasn't ours. That's at a training camp. He got a snake.
Well, I got a lot of mileage out of that when Wally Lim, our coach, said, if I ever catch who put that rattlesnake in the quarterback's room, they'll never play another down in the NFL. I almost didn't. And
was
why
it,
did that? I don't
what
know.
did you? Was it live?
It was when I opened the trunk. I made me a snake catcher, and I'd looked all training camp.
You put a rattlesnake in the trunk of your car,
and then it got loose. And when I lifted the trunk up, we were at Crider's open air dance land. Willie Nelson's playing that night. I said, everybody said, come here, I want to show you something. And I didn't realize that snake had gotten loose from that noose. I lifted that up and it like that, and it took 2 days to round the Oilers up. Boy, they were jumping fences, and I wasn't through with that snake. Of course, I did $500 worth of damage to the trunk of my car trying to kill that snake with a tire tube. With him striking at me, that's how nutty I was.
Yeah, that I think that would have
Finally
ended
gets
my
him
friendship
down.
with you right there.
And then I rolled him up between those beds, and he was still.
And it was
kinda
dead at that
writhing.
time, right? Or was it?
It was still writhing.
Oh yeah, isn't it weird how that?
Lawrence had the reputation of he spent more time, as he mentioned earlier, in the Baylor Student Union than going to class.
Really?
And it wasn't because he was thirsty. It was because of the ladies that were in there.
Never caught one of them. Never got a date.
No one ever like finally just said, "I'll go out with you," or
I finally realized, looking in the mirror, I was rather homely looking. But anyway,
what was the bowl game? Oh no, it was not a bowl game. Baylor Syracuse. This was your senior year, I think. And Floyd Little, Larry Zonka were on Syracuse.
That was the year after I left.
Oh, the year after you left.
Yes,
okay. So neither one of you were there.
No.
Okay. That the Milton Berle was like being driven around the track in a convertible. I didn't know if that was your last year or not.
No,
that was
that's
Syracuse.
my first year
Okay.
at the Oilers, but they worked them over.
I want you to look at him for a second. I know that.
That's hard to do.
What is when you think of Don Trull,
Yeah.
Lawrence Elkins, what do you think of?
I just think my old friend Gator.
Why did you get that nickname?
Because I had 2 teeth missing, and I had a partial bridge, and of course I took the bridge out when I played. But what's crazy, in high school, I played baseball and had it when I was my older brother, when I was about, 12 years old. This is for modern techniques of implants and everything else. These little gliders, balsa wood planes you'd throw and they'd do loop-the-loops, and he threw one at me and I had a baseball bat in my hand and I ducked and hit my teeth and broke one off, and it killed the root and all, so it had to be pulled, and so then I got a partial plate. But my baseball coach, who was the father of one of my teammates, growing up in Little League, we went and won the state championship in Little League baseball, And he gave me the name of Gator because he said, well, you smile and you look like an alligator. Had that gap right in his mouth, right in the front. And ironically, I got to Baylor. I didn't tell anybody or anything. And Ronnie Stanley was 2 years ahead of me, and he and Herbie Atkins lived on my floor at the end of the hall in Martin Hall. And we were in practice one day or something, and Stanley said, damn, you look just like a Gator, Trull.
And that's where it all
That's where
started.
it all started.
So, when you think of him,
Well, I think he's pretty neat. Wish I was smart as he was, but I never have been. Anyway, we've been good friends, but if it wasn't for him, wouldn't have done near as much at Baylor.
can you imagine your football career or life if he had Oklahoma City to anywhere else?
Yeah,
I mean, you still would have been a good player. No matter where you would have gone, he would have still been a great player as well. Both of you would have been great. But just how things happen. Some kid from Southeast High School, is that what you said? And here you are from Brownwood.
Brownwood, and including the Bluebonnet Bowl, catch 77 passes in one season.
I said 70. I couldn't remember.
Well, I caught 7, but they don't
count. They didn't count the bowl games.
Didn't count it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I could still say 77.
Now, speaking of my high school, small school on the south side of Oklahoma City. I don't know if you're familiar with Oklahoma City.
Oh,
The
yeah.
Canadian River runs through it. And there's the north side with Northwest Classen and Nichols Hills, which is the more affluent side of town.
Right.
My dad was a cab driver, and we lived on the south side of town. And, of course, the south side, I always thought we were a lot tougher, and we were, than the kids on the north side and everything. But from our school, our first All-American and Hall of Famer was a guy by the name of Clinton Thomas, Oklahoma, shared halfback opposite Tommy McDonald. And then a kid that was our ball boy, he was a freshman. His brother played football but wasn't very good, was a little kid by the name of Bobby Mercer, if you remember him.
The baseball player with the Yankees.
Great. He was a high school halfback and a linebacker, scored 54 touchdowns in high school.
Well, Mickey Mantle was a Oklahoman too, right? I mean,
Commerce,
that's
from
state.
Commerce.
Yeah.
But Bobby had a football scholarship.
Remember
to
Bobby
OU.
Mercer?
Bobby Mercer had a football scholarship to OU.
Wow.
As a halfback. But he signed with the Yankees, and the rest is history.
I remember that. Bobby Mercer. He was like the next. Of course, they tag people. Well, the next
Right.
so and so, the next so and so,
Right.
the next Mantle or
Yeah, he
whatever,
left.
which is always unfair as well. What did Lawrence Elkins mean to Don Trull? Can you imagine where you would be, what your life would be like, no matter what?
Well, if I hadn't, I'm glad I went to Baylor, first of all. I almost went to Oklahoma State, but came down to scholarship day, and Cliff Spiegel was the head coach at Oklahoma State at that time. His nephew was a guy by the name of C.B. Spiegel III, and C.B. and I lived a block apart.
That's okay.
And CB was a great high school quarterback at his dad's school, Capitol Hill High School in Oklahoma City. And he was a year behind me. And they recruited me, but then Cliff called me in and says, Don, we'd like to have you and all, but, I got my nephew coming next year, and he's a quarterback, and we're not going to be able to offer you a scholarship. And so I went to Baylor. To be honest, I probably would have gone to Oklahoma State.
Had you heard much about Baylor?
Not a thing. Only Baylor I knew about was a watch and the guy that played basketball, Elgin.
Elgin Baylor, the great, one of the
Right.
greatest players, and sometimes this name's not brought up enough for how good he
Brother
was.
was in the seminary, older brother at Fort Worth, and one of his real good friends was a cheerleader at Baylor when he was in undergraduate school. And so through hook and crook, my mom would send my brother clippings from the Oklahoma City paper, and then he would give them to, I can't even remember the guy's name, and his parents lived next door to Cotton Davidson. And so they would get him to Cotton.
There you go.
So basically Cotton recruited me and called me and came up to the all-state game and everything.
Because a lot of times people forget this, and even when I'm old enough now, and I say that a lot, but where the internet is now just something people are born into. I mean, immediate conversations, cell phones, text, social media, whatever. So, you see in the newspaper, Saudi Arabia, and you go, I'm sure, letters back and forth that could take days, but how it happened, how some kid from Southeast High School in Oklahoma ends up at Baylor, and you end up from Brownwood, and here's Texas and here's Darrell Royal as he's about to start his great run. That's pretty darn cool. And the two of you have been incredible for Baylor, and Baylor's been great for both of you as well. Baylor football, it like we've mentioned before, it's had its ups and downs or whatever. What does it mean, and I know both of you might shy away from this, but what does it mean that when they talk about the greatest names in Baylor football that you are included?
Feel honored. Sometimes feel like, golly, those people are a lot better than I ever thought about being. And that's how I feel, when I see them nowadays, how fast they are. And then I think, well, wait a minute, they didn't play both ways, did they? But anyway, throw that
Not
out.
only that, you return kicks and punts. Yeah.
And kicked off.
And kicked off.
And kicked off as well.
But times have changed. I mean.
Oh, yeah. Of course, I'd be upset if I wasn't included. That's just your own personal pride.
I feel the same way. I was trying to be a little humble there. But
when we're up there in the stands watching the game and you see a receiver running, you always say, that guy doesn't know how to cut. He's just rounding off his corners and everything, which is right.
Like a banana.
But we're kind of when I say critical, it's critical. We're assessing what they're doing wrong.
You can see it in a way that a lot of people may think they can, but you can't. You played the game. You played it at an elite level. You're in the Hall of Fame. You're in the Hall of Fame. I want to thank Marquise Cooley and also Andrew Robertson. They're here today in the studio helping us with what's going on. Obviously, Armstrong Sims and of course, both Cole Barber, Ashley Hodge, and Brian Etheridge. We wanted to start. We had Grant Tapp in about 5, 6, 8 weeks ago, and you guys were next on the radar, and I know we've talked about this for a few weeks, and this is great. This is something that Baylor fans, I think, will digest. I hope you've enjoyed every second of this because it's been fun. It's not, oh my God, we have 10 or 15 minutes on the radio, or we have, a 30-minute documentary or whatever. Have you had fun?
Oh yeah, I had a great time. I appreciate it. I know Lawrence does too. Being asked, and good to see my old buddy and have a few words with it and all. And we're going to go have lunch and
good
talk about who knows what.
And you're going to get honored by the Houston Touchdown Club here pretty soon as well.
In middle August, they have an award they give every year. I'm very humbled by it. I've been on the board since, speaking of Dick Magle, Dick Magle got me on it back in the late 70s after I retired, and as a board member. And then I was past president 6 years ago. And so I've been on it a little over 40 years. And they have an award they give every year they call Touchdowner of the Year to somebody within Texas, either player, coach, both, that's added not necessarily credibility, but noticeability, et cetera, to the game of football. Been a stalwart for football, and I'm following some pretty good guys. Last year, we gave it to Dan Pastorini. The year before that, last year we gave it to Terry Bradshaw. The year before that, we gave it to Pastorini. The year before that, we gave it to Archie Manning. And then, of course, all your famous coaches, Southwest Conference Royals in it, Slocum's in it, et cetera, et cetera.
And by the way, hoping and praying for
I was just going to say our prayers are for.
Yeah, hoping and praying for him and how he handles and battles what he has to deal with right now. Judy, your wife is here as well. Appreciate you being here and being patient with us.
I would not have missed this for anything.
Well,
I thoroughly enjoyed all of it.
I have too. I mean, for me, I'm not a Baylor alum, a graduate. I've covered Baylor now seriously since 2010, and it's incredible to get to know the history and be a part of it.
To hear all the stories is just wonderful.
Yeah, it is. And this is what it's for. That's why we're here. Don, thank you, man. Appreciate you. I know you had to drive all over the state to get up here, and you guys enjoy your lunch.
Bad.
Lawrence, great to hear from you. Great to see you, buddy.
Thank you.
Always great. The great Don Trull and Lawrence Elkins. I'm David Smoke. For all that I mentioned that are helping us get all this set up, and Sikkim365.com and Sikkim365 Radio. Goodbye. Right now from the studio in Sikkim 365 and Baylor Nation.